Tonight we're gonna talk about t-tests, and we're gonna focus exclusively on two types of t-tests. We're gonna talk about independent t-tests, and also we're gonna see how we can do dependent t-tests. We're gonna see what the differences are between those two. When we say independent t-test, we utilize that test whenever we're looking for differences between two groups, and more specifically we're looking at the difference in the mean score of a certain attribute between group 1 and group 2. So for example, I have two groups here. We have faculty who, based on some measure, were considered to be in the burnt out group, and we have some who were included in the not burned out group. And let's say that we wanted to see if there are significant differences in their stress related to teaching. So if we have to set up our hypothesis, our hypothesis will be, our null hypothesis will be, there are no significant differences between the two groups, the burnout group and not burned out group. Or our research or alternative hypothesis will be that there are significant differences in the mean score of stress related to teaching between the burnout and the not burnout group. Just like with any other hypothesis, we can have the non-directional hypothesis when we're talking about just having a difference or not difference between those groups. But we also can hypothesize that maybe there's a direction. Maybe the non-burnout group is going to have higher average or higher mean of stress related to teaching compared to the non-burnout group, or vice versa. So whenever we are hypothesizing about the direction of that change, our hypothesis is going to be directional as well. So let's see how we can do that in SPSS. Again, we have the two groups. Remember our design principle, we have one variable that designates our groups, and we're gonna focus on their stress score related to teaching. So what we can do is we can go under analyze, and we're gonna go down to compare means, and again we are talking about independent groups, right? So we're gonna select the independent samples t-test. Another way that you can remember the independent groups is that group 1 is independent of group 2. We have different participants in group 1 compared to group 2. So because we have that distinction, we're not expecting to see any dependence between those two groups. Since group 1 is separate than group 2, we can think of those as independent. So we're gonna go ahead and select that, and we said our test variable was the stress related to teaching, and that our grouping variable was the burnout, whether they were assigned to the burnout group or not the burnout group. Whenever you select that grouping variable and move it under the grouping field, you're gonna end up with two question marks. What SPSS wants you to do is define how your groups are coded. So it could be 1 and 2, it could be 0 and 1. If you have multiple groups, let's say that you have 5 groups, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and you want to look only at group 1 and 3. Clicking on here, you can define that you're not interested in looking across all 5 groups, but only between groups 1 and 3, or maybe you're interested in looking for any differences between group 2 and 5, whatever that is. To define our groups, we need to click on a little button, and I know that my groups are coded as 0 and 1, and it doesn't matter in what order we put them in. And we're gonna click OK. And the next thing, we can look at our output, which is somewhere down here. Here it is. It says automatically gives you how many participants we had in each group. So we had 348 participants in the not burnt out group and 119 in the burnout group. Also, it tells us what the averages are for our variables. So we have 53 average score of stress related to teaching for the non-burnout, and 61 for the burnout group. Of course, we have the standard deviation. Now, the table below is our table, most interesting table. What we need to look is, first of all, we're looking for significance, but you have to be careful because we have two boxes that tells us about significance. The first one is the Levin's test that actually tells us which of these two we're gonna look at. So if this value here is significant, or it's less than 0.05, then we have to look at the bottom line or the bottom row. If this one is greater than 0.05, then we stay and look across the first row. So in this case, our Levin's test is not significant, right? It's because 0.28 is greater than 0.05. So in this case, we can say, we're assuming that the variances are equal, we can stay on this line and look just across to look if our main test is significant or not. Now here, where it says t-test for equality of means, is actually our main test. And this column here tells us whether our test is significant or not. We're using the same rule, just with any other test. Any significance level that it's less than 0.05 designate significant differences, and anything that is greater than 0.05 tells us that there are no significant differences. In this case, we have 0.00, which is less than 0.05, so we can conclude that our differences in terms of the mean score of stress related to teaching is significant between the two groups, between the not burnt out group and the burnt out group. So this is how we do the IndependentT test, and make sure that you refer to our notes to see how we accurately report that.